Hey guys, welcome back to Results Junkies podcast. Paul and I are due to be in South Dakota later this week. We're going to try and record in person. And we're going to talk a little bit about what Paul plans to talk about in South Dakota, including a little bit of a mission that we're on for one of our portfolio companies, Points Path. And if we get time after that, we're going to talk a little bit about how the edges are showing on the Microsoft OpenAI partnership and Paul's continued fascination with AirPods and the fact that he might be wearing them 12 hours a day to be able to hear people. Can you hear me now, Paul? Can you hear me?
Right. Yeah, my old age is showing. Well, I got to say, I am definitely not a road warrior like you, Ed, but these next couple days, frankly, these next couple weeks are going to be kind of crazy. I'm going to Sioux Falls with you here in a little bit, which we'll talk about in just a moment. I come back from that on Friday night. I'm running the Marine Corps Marathon on Sunday.
Oh, boy.
Then I'm heading down to Florida for a board meeting Monday through Wednesday. Then I'm back for a couple days, and then Dana and I go to St. John for a little bit. Come back. I go to Nashville for some stuff. Come back. And then actually, I didn't tell you this. I'm keynoting an event in Des Moines, Iowa, the first week of December as well that we can talk about. So
you mentioned a little bit about Iowa in December, and I think I said that didn't sound as fun as it could possibly be.
I'm not Ed level of road warrior, but I'm exhausted just thinking about that. So more power to you.
Yeah, no, it's definitely not fun. I'm sure you'll have a healthy diet of United and all their trials and tribulations by the time you're done. Should be exciting.
I think the thing that you said to me years ago that's always stuck with me is that, United may not be the best, but at least they call you sir while they're screwing you.
Yeah, that's par for the course. It's about what I think what you and I are expecting as we fly off to Sioux Falls this week. A little bit of housekeeping for folks. Show at resultsjunkies.com is how you find us. He is at Paul Singh on all those social media channels. I am at Pizza in Motion. And just a reminder to folks that I am trying to invest in 50 travel startups or travel adjacent startups over the next 5 years. And we are still looking for portfolio companies. So if you have something in that space, love to hear more from you. You can, like I said, email show at resultsjunkies.com, or my Twitter DMs are open at Pizza in Motion, as one of the last 7 or 8 people still hanging out on Twitter.
Seriously, man. Yeah, so we're going to go out to Sioux Falls here in a couple days. I'm speaking at the AI conference, or at least moderating a panel at the AI conference that's happening in town there.
Yep.
And then, which we'll talk about that because that's been a hot topic for me lately. And then our buddy Julian's coming out, and we, I was texting Matt Paulson last night, and I said, well, selfishly, I'm coming to learn more about email from the godfather of Sioux Falls and email, Matt Paulson. But whatever the opposite of selfish is, I think Julian's gonna benefit quite a bit. I think I don't want to steal his thunder or say anything he's not willing to share outside of his investor updates, but man, they're on a rip. Email capture is like insane. I think he figured out an initial monetization strategy, which I'm curious to see if Matt Paulson rips apart. But anyway, I think it's gonna be fun. I think this is one of those things where people don't talk about this very often, but I think that when you're building a company, there's a million people that have opinions, but often the best advice you can get is from somebody that's kind of lived in that world and still lives in that world. And that's a good example of like somebody like Matt Paulson, who runs MarketBeat, thinks about email and business models around email day and night. And between his snarky tweets, actually has a lot of smart things to say. And I think selfishly, we're both, we're investors in Julian, and I think it'd be good for Julian to learn some of that stuff. And Julian's doing just fine without Matt, but I can't help but wonder if it gets even better from there.
No, I'm certainly hoping that Matt can help Julian unlock some things. I am personally very thankful that we're supposed to be in the 60s while we're in South Dakota. As somebody who really doesn't like the cold all that much, definitely looking forward to that. And to your point, you mentioned earlier, and we were talking about this in pre-show. I think, I'm going to be interested to watch this AI panel in Sioux Falls, because we talk about AI almost every week on the show, and I mean it's very prevalent right now. And I think what's interesting to me is, I think when you and I did the tech tour back in the mid-teens, it wasn't necessarily saying that we knew what to expect, because every once in a while a company would pop up and we'd be like, okay, well, didn't expect to see that. But for the most part, what we saw were the entrepreneurs and the founders in St. Louis and Fort Wayne were the same as the founders in Silicon Valley or Boston. They just had more access to capital, but these were still innovators and people coming up with ideas. I think, what the typical AI startup, is going to be in the future is still very much undefined. But I thought you had an interesting take leading up to the panel on this concept of like how people are going to interact with AI.
Yeah. So this is something I've just been noodling on for a while. And again, like if people want to heckle me or whatever, hit me up on social media or show at resultsjunkies.com. But the gist of it is that, I I've been offline for a couple of years in terms of like not going to conferences and stuff. I had a lot of young kids and all that. And now I'm finally, Dana and I are at a point where I can like disappear for a night just to go to some of these conferences. And so about 2 weeks ago, I went to my first healthcare conference, and it was held by the American Physical Therapy Association and blah blah blah. And it was a pretty big deal. I mean, it was probably a couple thousand attendees. I don't actually know the numbers. The tickets were like $1,500 a pop. I mean,
Mm.
it was painful to write, to actually sign up. And in hindsight, I'm glad I went. We got a lot of value out of it. But in the context of AI, one of the things I think is really fascinating is that you had a lot of technology companies running around that place talking about AI. It was just like, I mean, you could make a drinking game out of it. It's like, how fast can somebody integrate the word AI into a conversation, right? And then on the flip side, you had a lot of private practice owners that are wandering around, and they're asking themselves like, what in the world does this have to do with me? What, like, how do I don't care if it's AI or, outsourced labor somewhere else. What is this going to do for me? And that's left me with this question for the last 10 or 12 days of, and maybe this is a rhetorical question, but I'm curious if it triggers something for you, but it's going to be that I think a variation of this is going to be, I think, how I kick off the panel in Sioux Falls later this week. And that is, I do wonder what the first wow moment for the average consumer is going to be, where they don't really know whether it was AI or machine learning or, frankly, just Amazon Mechanical Turk with random people sitting 8 time zones away, just pretending to be, the AI. I guess that's the big thing I've been kind of questioning is, what do we think the first interaction is going to be? Because I sit here as an average consumer and I think about the fact that, like, I bought, just last night, and I don't, rule number one of running a marathon is you got to tell everybody you're running a marathon, right? But as an example, last night I was sitting there and right before I went to bed, I was like, oh, I need to get some there's these little clips that attach your bib to your shirt. It's like,
Mm.
oh, I need to pick up a pair. I can't find mine. Here we go. I went into Amazon. I type in what I remember to be the brand name, and the recommended search comes up. And I can clearly see that 1 or 2 of the results are sponsored. It's labeled sponsored, but the rest of it is, recommended stuff. And it made me wonder last night, like, how much of those recommendations are machine learning versus personalized AI versus just something hard coded? And I think that's the poorly articulated question I'm really interested to kind of get some input on is like, what do we think the first real wow moment's going to be for the average consumer? Because I don't think my mom's ever going to think about AI. She doesn't think about whether the database of whatever product she uses is MySQL or,
Right.
Amazon, whatever. She's an average consumer. So anyway, that's a bit of a run-on sentence, but kind of curious if you have any bets. Like, what do you think the first interaction is going to be with the average consumer, where they're like, wow, how did that happen? And then they learn it's AI. Do you have any gut calls?
Yeah, I mean, first off, I think it's entirely possible that your mom may never have that aha moment, just because I think, older consumers are just less likely to run into the sort of groundbreaking things that would change things because of their patterns, their behaviors. I mean, my high school English teacher still uses a typical, travel agent human being for all of their travel, regardless of whether it's a simple flight from point A to point B or it's a very complicated trip. So, the chances that he's going to run into something that's AI focused and recognize the impact is low. I think it's more likely that, in using your mom's example, services that she's provided by people will become easier for those people to provide her, but she may never see the direct results of AI in something that she chooses to do. It's easy to think about it from a developer standpoint because we hear these stories all the time about how AI has made it easier for folks to code or do graphic interfaces or things of that nature, and how the power of one designer can be stretched significantly further using some of these AI agents. You said something in pre-show that I think you're onto something, maybe not in this exact concept, but something similar. Like if there's a first, you talked about, hey, maybe the next time I book a flight on United Airlines, instead of them showing me the shortest flight time or the cheapest flight, that they might analyze all of my patterns and suggest something to me that they believe is the right fit for me. I mean, I'm not 100% sure that's it, but what I do think is, I like using United as the example. They're planning to dig into media in a bigger way, and they're planning to use the data that they collect on you for other things. And so I think if I had to guess, it's it's probably some sort of a service that you use today that's almost like a utility. Airlines, trains,
Yeah.
large, cable companies, things like that have just immense amounts of data on you, Google, whatever, who launches some sort of other service, whether it's media related or maybe it's affiliate based, like what Matt Paulson's doing in South Dakota.
Yeah.
But it's
Yeah.
something like that causes you to likely want to buy something because we're a consumer based economy. And I just can't tell right now. I think the only thing I'm torn on is whether it's providing a well, I don't want to use goods and services unique terms here because like I think we'd argue that a flight could be a service, but in this case, I'll call like you booking a flight on United Airlines sort of like a normal good that you might purchase, even though it's technically a service for this. But then like the other side of that would be your first aha moment could be understanding that thing you're going to buy. Like right now, a lot of people I know aren't spending whatever it is, 15 or $20 a month for ChatGPT. But I do think there's a service coming up soon that they will spend that amount of money for that is powered by AI. I think if I had to guess, it's something in that bucket.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I think, it's interesting as you were talking about that, I was just thinking that one of the so I think we've talked about this before. I use Superhuman, the mail app, and I'm not an
Yes,
investor in it or anything like that. I'm just a normal customer, and
we've had these
I
debates before.
yeah,
Threading versus
obviously
no
you
threading.
use email like a crazy person, so you don't
I do.
like
I
the way they
absolutely do.
but, they in one of the recent updates that's included in there is this idea of like an AI search engine, which at first I like kind of rolled my eyes. I'm like, I don't need AI in my email. But I found myself, interestingly enough, based on the way that they have now integrated it into the search bar,
Mhm.
I find myself not thinking about whether or not I'm using AI or not. Now what I find myself thinking as a user is like I can type the question in plain English. Like I don't know how to articulate this, but the other day I was looking for a particular email that I
Mhm.
knew who sent it to me,
Mhm.
and I was trying to do keywords. So I put in their name or their from email, and then I was trying to do
Right.
keywords, like because I was looking for a particular attachment. And I remember this was for a board deck I was looking for. And
Uh-huh.
so I typed in the person's name space board deck, thinking I would find it. Well, my inbox, like yours, is probably a nightmare. There's a million board decks in there,
Sure.
and turns out I didn't use her name. I just used her first name, and so I couldn't figure it out. Right. What I didn't realize until I looked closer was like, then like right there in the search bar, the first option is to use AI. Second options are to do the straight text search. And so it just encouraged you to write the question in plain English. So I said, "Where is the board deck that so and so sent me?" And I hit
Right.
enter. Now, what made it awkward was it took probably 7 seconds round trip or something, but boom, it came back with like a clean answer. Hey, the latest board deck template came from from this person on this date. Click here to see the email. And I'm like,
Hmm.
wow, that's pretty interesting. And it makes me wonder, the other day I was talking to this person, Kaylee, who is running that conference in Des Moines that I'll be
Yeah.
speaking at. And I'm thinking like, right now I mean, you and I have both been on calls where there's like an AI recording thing in the background that's supposed to take notes, right? But okay, I like in this case, and this is just me thinking about like, what would be kind of cool is like, I don't need another AI note taker on its own. I would like an AI note taker that also takes the initiative to do something. So, for example, one of the
Right.
deliverables at the end of the call, we agreed. She's like, "Hey, I need a headshot from you. I need a bio or whatever." Those are all things already in my email, right?
Nope.
Secondly, the other deliverable was she even though I offered to pay for my own flight, she's like, "I insist we will pay." And I was like, "Okay, well, if you change your mind, it's all good." She's like, "Just send me the flights you want." Now, here we go. those are scenarios where I think it'd be very fascinating for the AI to not just record this and
Right.
summarize it, but to maybe just offer me a couple suggestions and take that next step to draft the response. And that brings me to this point of like, you and I being investors, I'll say this for myself and see how you respond. I'll be quiet after this is like, I don't want to invest in AI. The last thing I want to do is pile drive money into broad AI, knowing that OpenAI has so much money, it doesn't really matter. What I do want to invest in is consumer and B2B companies that make like they solve a problem so magically that you're delighted to figure out that it was AI. And
Yeah.
that's the thing. That's the reason I didn't invest in blockchain. Everybody was like, I'm a blockchain company. I don't want to invest in a blockchain company. I want to invest in a consumer or B2B company. And if you happen to use blockchain, I don't care. So anyway, I'm kind of curious how you think about that. I know there was a lot to that idea.
No, there's a lot, but I think you're on the right track in terms of the things that are going to excite us and that are going to cause us to want to invest in these things from a B2C standpoint, consumer facing things. I think one of the other things that you mentioned in pre-show that I would say falls into the category of things I'm likely to use, and this goes along with this theme that you mentioned in terms of superhuman and how it's helping you. I still feel like a smaller language model built off of the information on my phone as part of like the new iOS release is something that I could see that I would pay for. Now, I mean, I sort of feel like based on the price of Apple's products that should to a large degree be included in what I paid for the phone, but we'll have to see. I would agree that tools in my inbox. To your point, when you write back to that person that's organizing the conference in Des Moines, why couldn't Gmail or Superhuman or your mail client say, hey, there's a 2 p.m. nonstop flight on
Bingo.
December 12th to Des Moines, on your preferred carrier, United. So there's threads that they can pull together there, and I think those are some of the things that are viable.
I think this next week or two is going to be very fascinating. I think look, I think years ago, Apple released iOS 15 or 14, and it totally upended the pay-per-click market and the
Yeah,
strategies of e-commerce companies and everybody. And over the years, that trend has remained, right? I mean, iOS, it's so large, it has such a large footprint that what ends up working there can disrupt a lot of things. I think this next week is gonna be really fascinating with
yeah.
18.1 coming out. And I think what I've read is there's gonna be a wait list for Apple Intelligence so that they don't, like, inundate everybody or whatever. We'll see, but
Hmm.
it'll be really fascinating. I just think about, like, the text chain between you, me, and Julian last night, and in between all of the stupid, high school banter, ultimately, what we were trying to coalesce on is where in the world we're gonna stay.
Right.
And, our devices probably know more about us than anything else, and when I think about the possibilities here, it's like, I don't care whether it's AI, machine learning, I mean, I'm speaking broadly here, but, like, I don't care how it happens. Like, at the end of the day, once we all agreed where we were gonna stay, I had to go click 7 things to go book that hotel.
Yeah.
Julian probably did the same, and you probably did the same.
Oh,
And I
I
think
gotta
that's
confess that it's probably a good time to confess. I still haven't made those clicks because I still need to call Chase Travel to cancel my other hotel reservation. But I do intend to make those clicks between now and when we actually get
I
to St.
guess you
Paul.
can sleep on my crappy
No.
hotel couch if you need
No,
to.
no, yeah,
Uh
no, 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 Sheraton couches are not on the list. They're not on the approved sleeping list.
Well, I think it'll be interesting to see how this plays out, and I think, if you're in Sioux Falls this week, actually, when this episode releases, it'll be the night of this releases. If you're in Sioux Falls, come heckle, come hang, and I know
Please
we'll be
heckle.
floating around on that Friday as well, learning about all things email. So it's gonna be a good one. Uh,
Yeah, I think we got time to either talk about AirPods and your lack of hearing or to talk about Microsoft and OpenAI. What's it gonna be, man?
let's talk about the AirPods. By the way, I think that's. I mean, look, selfishly, it's very interesting to me this idea that they're going to become hearing aids. Actually, you set it up. You set it up, and then I'll talk about
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, we talked about this a few weeks ago, and so, Apple announced that the AirPods Pro 2 were going to add hearing aid functionality, and what's interesting here is that, hearing aids haven't always been an over-the-counter product. I think they're regulated by the FTC. There was a point in time where you had to, there was licensing requirements about being able to sell hearing aids, and I think that was due to a lot of fraud in this space. So only because of that change in legislation, it seems that Apple's been able to do what they did, which is with the AirPod Pro 2, because of the onboard chip in that unit, they can now detect your level of hearing. And I read a review on this. It sort of goes back to, me in the 3rd grade where you would go down to the nurse's office and you put on these big ugly headphones and they would play tones in your ear. So your AirPods will play tones in a quiet room to evaluate how much hearing loss you have. And once they know how much hearing loss you have in each ear, they'll amplify sound based on that profile. And so
Yeah.
that's what we've learned since we talked about this the first time, I call it 2 weeks ago.
Well, I think this is like, well, I think it's super fascinating for a couple reasons. I think the first is that so medical devices are generally regulated by the FDA, and understandably so. And I forget the actual legal terms here, but basically there's a extremely stringent set of regulations if a
Mhm.
device or an object is going to enter the body. And then there's slightly less or slightly broader rules, I should say, around like things like hearing aids that sit on the outside of your body. And like most things, I think it comes from a good place, right? We should
Yeah.
probably make sure that things that, you know, are medical in nature are regulated. But I think more and more technology companies are starting to recognize, and I'll speak for myself on this personally. It's like, I've spent the last 20 years in the tech world, and what we consider to be big exits and big markets by tech standards can be very big, multi-billion-dollar markets, things like
Sure.
that.
Yeah.
But I think more and more tech companies, and again, I'm speaking for myself too, are coming to the realization that the healthcare market is like 5x bigger, 5x bigger than anything we've ever seen in the tech world. And so it's not surprising to see companies like Apple spending the incredible amount of cash required, for example, to get the EKG or ECG monitors on their iPhone or on their Apple watches,
Yeah.
pulse oxygen monitors in there. I mean, I don't think it's like certified yet, but it's on there. I think sleep apnea is coming out here pretty soon, right? And so now you think about hearing aids. So beyond like my own personal desire to test these things out, I just think it's really fascinating that technology companies are seeing how large the available market here is. And I think this is going to be net good for the average consumer. I've never had hearing aids, but from what I understand from some extended family that have them, they're not cheap. They're super delicate. I mean, we're talking about, I think one of my cousins was saying it was like $1,000 a pair, and God help you if you like broke one.
Oh, far
Um,
beyond that, I can tell you from my dad's standpoint,
yeah,
he's bought hearing aids. I've helped him buy hearing aids a couple of times at Costco, and Costco is certainly not the Cadillac of hearing aids, but they're relatively good products. I would say definitely above average for where they rank in terms of reviews from
yeah,
organizations like Consumer Reports and stuff like that.
yeah, yeah,
His last set had most of the common bells and whistles now. So, for example, if you have a phone that has Bluetooth, the earpiece, the actual device, hearing aid can answer the call and it
yep.
transmits Bluetooth from your phone directly to the piece, so you don't have to hold your phone up, which causes interference. All that. His price was like 2,400 bucks for his most recent set.
Yeah, isn't that wild? Because, like,
Mhm.
these AirPod 2s or whatever that I got right here are, like, 200
300 bucks.
bucks, 300
Yeah,
bucks, yeah?
yeah, yeah.
And so it's just fascinating, and the thing I think about is this idea of, like, when I don't know about you, but when I got my first Apple Watch,
Hmm.
it didn't have what it has today, right? Like,
Right.
years ago, it didn't have any of the heart rate. I mean, maybe I don't even think it had heart rate sensors. It was just
Mhm.
basically an extension of your phone, and
Pretty much.
I could run
Yeah.
with it, right? But I remember the most self-conscious feeling that I had at the time was, like, when an alert would pop on my watch, I almost felt bad looking at it if I was in a
Yeah.
meeting with somebody.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're nodding, so you probably felt this way too. I
Yeah.
t Tell me if you
It's become less taboo, but it still feels a little bit like
it
that today.
still feels a bit weird, but
Yep.
now I feel like it's been out there long enough where people just sort of, like, they don't care. Like, I'm not gonna be rude and look at it like this with you, but
Yeah.
if it buzzes, I can look down and I can set tones so I know it's my
Yep.
wife versus somebody random.
Right.
And I think that's where it gets really interesting now to me, I think, as a consumer, is that this idea that, like, I think these, hearing aids, I've always equated hearing aids, like, I'm only 43, I don't feel old, but when I think about the idea of potentially having to get hearing aids, I don't wanna feel old, and the idea of, like, putting in, like, an old school hearing aid, putting aside the cost and all that stuff for a moment, I don't know, like, on the one hand, it feels rude to walk around with AirPods in a social setting because, I think the etiquette right now is if you have the AirPods in, you're probably not wanting to be spoken to.
Yeah.
And I think the most awkward thing over the next couple months is gonna be figuring out, like, how social dynamics change around that. So, just to tie up this idea or this topic for just a moment, I think this is interesting from a couple reasons. Number 1, the cost of hearing aids, if this works. Based on your example there, we're talking about
Yeah.
a tenth of the price, which
Mhm.
will make it a lot more accessible for people. Number 2, if it truly is certified, I think that opens the door for medical or, healthcare reimbursement for it,
Potentially. Yeah.
potentially, right? Even bigger market share for Apple,
Mhm.
that's cool too, but
Yeah. Yeah.
accessibility to more and more people, I think is really key there. And number 3, like, it's just baked into the native ecosystem. My watch tells me what my heart rate is, it tells me whether I slept good at night. Soon it's gonna tell me I don't know, I'm not like I know I sound like an Apple fanboy, but just as a guy with a bunch of kids trying to juggle a business and trying to, like, be a good husband at the same time, like, that deep integration of everything, I don't know, it just feels really promising. I think these next couple of years are gonna be pretty exciting from that perspective. Like, I'm probably oversharing here. I have to go do a sleep study in December. Like, one of our like, Indian families don't talk about, like, medical history very often, so, like,
Yeah.
every couple of years, I need to go do all these tests because none of my extended family tells us if they ever had anything,
Yeah.
and, like, I feel fine, but anyway, like, the point is, like, that's a sleep apnea test.
Yep.
If anything happens with that test, then all of a sudden, it's a couple $1,000s worth of CPAP stuff, and hopefully some of it's covered by insurance, but, man, what happens if my watch gets certified and
Yeah.
can detect some of these things way in advance? Because as it stands right now, I had to go in for a original appointment a month ago, and the first sleep apnea test was 90 days ago or 90 days later.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I think about this from, like, the accessibility standpoint, like, more and more people like you and I are really fortunate. We can take a break for a doctor's appointment, but, the average employee at Walmart or, I don't know, Buc-ee's isn't able to do that very often. You know? I know that's not a reflection on either company. I'm just saying that,
Yeah.
like, barriers to healthcare and barriers to sometimes better things are adversely or counterintuitively less available to the people that need them the most. And
Yeah, I
that's
think
where
I
I think this is interesting.
yeah, yeah, and I think I close with one other element on this. I think that our generation is probably more susceptible broadly to some level of hearing loss, and that earbuds are something that's obviously been something we've lived with our entire lives, but our parents did not. But also too, when you and I were young, there really weren't any sort of like child controls in terms of volume levels. It was just, I remember I got my Walkman, I plugged my headphones in, I turned it up as loud as I could. Where
Yeah.
like kids' headphones don't do that nowadays. So I do think that there will be, to some degree, maybe not as impactful individual hearing loss as there might have been for our parents' generation, but probably broadly more mild levels of hearing loss. Where, to your point, maybe you don't need a specialized $3,000 or $4,000 device. Maybe you just need a little bit of help in your waning years, Mister Singh. What?
I don't feel
Huh?
old, I'm telling you, man.
Right? Yeah. Well, you don't
But
look old except for the gray in your beard.
yeah, well, I somehow a picture came up of the tech tour, and I was like, "Who is that guy with a lot less gray?" Somebody responded to one of my emails the other day, on the results tracking list, was like, "That's not an up-to-date photo."
Yep.
I was like
No. Nope.
"Nope, nope, you're right, yeah, I had a lot of kids between then and now."
Yes. Yes,
Um,
you did. And kids equals gray. I don't know what the ratio is, but
yeah.
it's exponential once you have more. So
I hope
I
I know we gotta jump here. I do hope that one of the things we can probably unpack a little bit more on a future episode is sort of, the investing side of this, because I think there's something to this idea of, like, what in the world are we actually gonna invest in here? Because you and I
yeah.
are, as smaller investors, angel investors, we're priced out of anything hardware related, right?
Yeah.
We're highly unlikely to invest in the next NVIDIA competitor. But AI is here to stay. And so now the question becomes, what is the thesis around investing in this? Is it, so anyway, I think that'd be kind of a fun thing to unpack at some point. Uh, But let's see. Let's see what the audience decides they want us to talk about. So we'll see where it goes.
Well, before we unpack that, we've got to pack for Sioux Falls.
Oh, nice. Nicely done, sir. That was a nice spin. I like that.
As always, a professional podcaster that I am, closing us out. Can't wait to see you in a mere 48 hours, Mr. Actually, less than that, because
we're on the same flights.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, just know that I will be the guy with the eye mask on and the 30-minute power nap as soon as we take off. So don't talk to me for that. And I will tell you right now, I'm going to be real nice. If you happen to be in first class with me, you can have my United First Class breakfast along with yours.
I am sitting right next to you, actually, unbeknownst to either of us.
Yes.
It turns out I'm sitting right next to you. So I will indeed actually eat your awful scrambled eggs or whatever the hell they give us that day.
And I want to hear a full report on them as soon as I wake up. And if I have my earbuds in and it doesn't appear that I'm listening to you, just keep talking. I'm sure I can.
You know, the best part of that flight, though, is I get to sneak into a lounge with you now at O'Hare. It's great.
Oh, so I think what Paul's saying is I have to drag him into a United Club. All right.
Ooh, cheap Indian alert. Yep. I'm mooching.
Duly noted. All right, man. See you in a couple days.
I'll see you in a couple days. See ya.